And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. All right, let's, like I said before the break, keep it moving with more of these top international headlines, especially when it comes to the war in Ukraine. President Trump going after Russian President Vladimir Putin on Truth Social over the weekend. This, as some of the back and forth continues between the United States and India on, remember, those Indian purchases of Russian oil. The U.S. now going to levy a 25% tariff on India over some of those very purchases here. Fox News correspondent Jennifer Griffin has more from the Pentagon. Let's listen.
Days after President Trump ordered 2 U.S. nuclear-armed submarines to position themselves toward Russia in response to a veiled threat from Russia's former president, China and Russia began pre-planned artillery and anti-submarine drills near Vladivostok in the Sea of Japan. It's the first time China has deployed a submarine to a port in Russia. Russia and China have nuclear-powered submarines capable of firing nuclear weapons, but sent diesel-powered subs to participate in the drills. On Sunday, President Trump was asked if the 2 American submarines had deployed.
They are in the region, yeah, where they have to be.
U.S. nuclear submarines are deployed in the Atlantic and the Pacific at all times. China's Navy is expanding its reach, potentially culminating in a submarine showdown near Taiwan. A recent war game conducted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies revealed a Chinese blockade could slash Taiwan's electricity to a mere 20%, shutting down critical industries like chip manufacturing, shaking the global economy. Seth Jones played China in the recent game.
Did not have as many nuclear-powered attack submarines, did not have a lot of ability to conduct anti-submarine warfare, so was fairly blind in understanding what the U.S. was doing subsurface.
A vulnerability the U.S. and Taiwan can exploit. The U.S. Navy has dozens of nuclear-powered submarines. 14 are capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Each Ohio-class sub can carry 20 Trident ballistic missiles with 8 nuclear warheads each, meaning one American Ohio-class nuclear submarine could strike 160 cities at once. At the Pentagon, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
Jennifer, thanks so much. So this was the post, the latest message from Trump there on Truth Social, saying this to India, that India is not only buying massive amounts of Russian oil, they are then, for much of the oil purchased, selling it on the open market for big profits, saying they don't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine. Because of this, I will be substantially raising the tariff paid by India to the USA. Thank you for your attention to this matter here. So let's talk about all of this with our friends and colleagues there at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. He joins me. Mark, so good of you to be with us here. Hope you had a good weekend. I guess I got to ask this. We can get to the positioning of those nuclear-powered submarines in just a moment here. The India question, what was their response? Is India going to keep buying Russian oil or no? Are they going to absorb the tariff, 25%? And Mark, I think you might be muted there.
I think India has been inconsistent on this, which is to say the initial reporting about 3 days ago was that they were going to stop the purchases. Then yesterday, the Indian ministry said they were going to continue the purchases, and then this morning it came out that it's in between. I think Modi is Prime Minister Modi of India is trying to figure out where Trump really sits on this. You know, Trump in the past has made threats that he did not carry through on in regard to these kind of large-scale tariffs, and so I think he's probably keeping his cards close to his chest while he waits to see how this talk between Steve Witkoff and President Putin or his team go over the next 2 to 3 days.
So why does, I guess, India rely so heavily on Russian oil? Is it cheap? Is it discounted? Could they look for it elsewhere?
Absolutely, that's the reason. You're right on. It's money. Modi's number one goal is to drive the Indian economy, their GDP growth and low cost of energy per unit, right? That they get from buying discounted Russian shadow fleet oil makes their commodities less expensive on the international market. So India's benefits is, and President Trump had it just right, India profits on the back of Ukrainian sacrifice. And so President Trump may hold them accountable.
So, Mark, the Associated Press calls this a hiccup in U.S.-India relations. They say that Trump slapping 25% tariffs on India, as well as an unspecified penalty. What might that penalty be? I want to go back to the previous question I asked you. I mean, it just seems like India is going to go along and absorb this. It's not going to have the intended effect, or will it?
No, I think it will. If
Okay.
the president actually applies extra penalty, extra tariff percentages, I think Modi will back off of this, because then as you mentioned earlier, there's this slight discount, right? That slight discount will be more than lost in the tariffing. So my gut reaction is that if President Trump demonstrates that he's serious about this, Prime Minister Modi will back off, and China will not be buying this shadow fleet Russian fossil fuels.
So, Mark, you alluded to this first. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will meet with Putin later this week. This after President Trump made that announcement this past weekend about the positioning of two of these nuclear submarines there. Now, where are those submarines going? Is that going to be leverage for Witkoff going into this meeting with Putin, do you think?
Well, it really depends what kind of submarines are. Jennifer Griffin, I think, postulated properly that they're ballistic missile submarines.
Okay.
If so, they can operate anywhere. Their ability to hold Russian cities at risk is pretty much as they exit port in either Georgia or Washington State. So I think that moving them was more President Trump doing a little bit of nuclear rhetoric or a little bit of flexing about U.S. capabilities and capacity, and reminding former President Medvedev, to stop hassling or stop mocking the president for his moves against Russia. So I think these submarines will be somewhere off the coast. I think they probably are SSBNs, and we do slight surges for training purposes every year. This can count as their training surge as they go out.
So, Mark, there was a term Trump used in that post on Truth Social, the Russian war machine. Have you ever heard Trump use that? What do you make of, and I will say this is somewhat of a 180-degree turn with regard to Putin and the threat he poses, not only, just to Ukraine, but overall here. Do you see kind of a sea change in Trump's view of Putin going on over the last several months, culminating in the use of the Russian war machine, that term? Haven't heard that before from him, have we?
No, it's a great catch. I think that really is, it's the art of the terminology there. He's making it clear who the adversary is. He's making it clear who he's holding accountable. So when he uses terminology like the art of the war machine, I think he's signaling to President Putin, I really am going to hold you accountable now. And you and I have spoken 5 or 6 times about this, and each time I think the president's gotten closer and closer to taking the full suite of actions that would be necessary to put a maximum pressure campaign on Russia.
I mean, where does Putin stand right now? I was speaking with my our friend and colleague, you've been on with him, Hal Kempfer. I always ask Hal, what concessions is Putin being forced to make? He's slowly but surely gaining strategic advantages on the battlefield in Ukraine. He's flying high, you could say. I mean, he's not on his back foot here. What will put him there, Mark?
So you're right. So far, he hasn't had to make those concessions because the president really hasn't done a pressure campaign against him as he did against Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine back in February. What a maximum pressure campaign would look like is 3 lines of effort. The first is the one you and I have talked about here, sanctions or tariffs on the shadow fleet and the secondary and tertiary receivers of the shadow fleet, principally China and India. That's number one, that economic pressure. Number 2 is improving the flow of defensive weapons. I think that one's actually moving now. Now, the difference is President Trump's making clear the United States isn't going to pay for those weapons, but he's allowing European partners and Ukraine itself to buy those defensive weapons from the U.S. defense industrial base. He could give them better head of the line and immediate drawdown things. There's things he can do within that second line of effort to make more efficient. And the third line of effort is providing attack weapons. And here I'm thinking specifically about a weapon called ATACMS, which is a long-range strike weapon, up to 300 kilometers that the U.S. has actually moved on from. We're buying follow-on ATACMS-2s and something called the precision strike missile. And so we could give up our older ATACMS to the Ukrainians with very few restrictions on how they use them. Those three lines of effort, sanctions, defensive weapons, offensive weapons, is how you bring a maximum pressure campaign against Vladimir Putin.
Mark, while we have you, let's move from Russia and Ukraine to the Far East, talking China, talking Taiwan. You were recently there in Taiwan, and you can tell us about your trip, your visit here. I want to just kind of start the segment this way because we got this post over the weekend. U.S. Ambassador to China, David Perdue, with posting this photo, meeting with the Chinese leader Xi, saying, "I was truly honored to meet President Xi Jinping and present my credentials. I'm proud to represent President Trump and the American people as U.S. ambassador, and I'm focused on implementing President Trump's foreign policy there in China." This as the annual Ketagalan Forum Indo-Pacific Security Dialogue is going on in Taipei. Former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson just spoke at it live there. Mark, why were you in Taiwan?
Well, yeah, I did get back from Taiwan over the weekend. I was there for two things. One, the Foundation for Defense of Democracy is the think tank I'm with. We ran a tabletop exercise on how to combat a energy-focused, cyber-enabled economic warfare campaign by China. That's where they maximize the pressure on Taiwan through attacks on the energy infrastructure. And Taiwan's extremely vulnerable, importing 97% of its LNG and fuel and oil and coal, and therefore very vulnerable to Chinese quarantines or embargoes or even blockading. So we walked through all the different ways the United States, Taiwan, and other allies and partners like Japan and Australia can assist Taiwan in fending off this kind of pressure campaign. This is what we in the military call the most likely scenario, whereas that cross-strait invasion you hear a lot about and that Jennifer Griffin was talking about is the most dangerous scenario. You have to practice for both, but you better practice for that most likely one.
Is it common knowledge or conventional wisdom in Taiwan right now that there could be a Chinese invasion in this term, in President Trump's term, this first term?
So I think the one I just described, the cyber-enabled economic warfare campaign, they know is happening now, and they know it can be turned up and happen in the next 2 to 3 years, and it could buckle Taiwan. As far as the cross-strait invasion, I think they believe it's starting to slip to the right. Maybe it's not 2027, could be 2028, 2029. That's when China will have the capability to do it. You never know when they would pull the trigger and do it, but you assume they wouldn't do it before they knew they could be successful, and that's still a few years off.
Okay, live picture there, Mark, at the White House. I didn't get you on to talk about this story. I didn't know you were in Taiwan, but it's relevant. This was 6 days ago. The Taiwanese government calling off a plan for its president to transit through the United States on his way to Latin America. So this is, they report, amid speculation that the Trump administration had opposed a proposed stopover by the Taiwanese president, Lai Ching-te, in New York. Taipei said Lai had no overseas travel plans due to domestic issues, including natural disasters and tariff negotiations with the United States. The other proposed stop on his itinerary was in Dallas there. What's going on here, Mark, do you think?
Well, I think what's happening right now is the United States is focusing on China, right? We just had this unusual exchange where China began to threaten our critical minerals, and the United States kind of buckled and allowed the sale of the NVIDIA's H20 chips to China. So we're right in the middle of a high-stakes pressure campaign or economic campaign with the Chinese, and President Trump really wants a meeting with Chairman Xi to discuss this. And the only way to do that is to kind of get all the other issues off the table. So I think we told Taiwan, let's hold off on this. So do I think President Lai is going to visit? You bet. But I think he's going to visit before any kind of summit between Trump and Xi, no way.
Okay, final word there. Mark Montgomery, thanks so much for your time. I know it's late. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.